Whoops, sorry, Bones. What's up, guys? Hey, so, well, my bracelet got cut and Bones is bones. So today we're going to talk about chest a little bit more. Last week we talked about building an upper chest. So now we're going to finish the conversation and talk about the rest of the chest. So the interesting thing about the chest is it's got a lot of different angles, and look, bodybuilding is all about training angles. I'm looking for in my pocket here. I got my little elastic that I always use. Bodybuilding is all about angles, and you hear that a lot, you know. So that means training from different angles to thoroughly and effectively target a muscle. So let's talk about the chest real quick. So all heads, and there's technically, some people say there's 2 heads of the chest, some people say there's 3. Last week we talked about the clavicular head, which is your upper chest. There's your sternal head, meaning that it originates from the sternum here, and so that's going to be the majority of your chest. And then there's also, some people will say that there's a 3rd head, which is like the abdominal head, and that's because it inserts down low here. Really doesn't matter what the heads are, just know that really comes down to the angle of the muscle fibers that really allows you to target that area. So for example, if you know, all 3 are going to insert relatively in the same spot on the humerus. So upper chest, you're going to get this upward angle. For the middle of the chest, it's going to be like this. Lower chest like this. So it's almost like this fan shape, and all these different angles are the direction of those fibers, and so that's why they say it's like a fan-like muscle. So your upper chest really obviously is going to help pull your arm more up, versus maybe lower chest helps pull more down. So that's going to be your difference between, say, doing an incline press versus a flat bench versus, say, decline. And it's all because of the direction of those muscle fibers. So it's important for us to understand when it comes to targeting those, what exercises we're going to do. So today we're going to talk about mainly building the majority of our chest, which is going to be that sternal head of the, or sternocostal head of the chest. And so that's going to be everything pretty much with our arms right out in front of us. Now last week we talked about the challenge with building our upper chest is the engagement of our anterior delts, that in any of our incline movements, especially on an incline bench, we have very high engagement of our anterior delts. Now, depending on the studies that you look at, all of them vary in the information. Some will say that there's almost an equal amount of engagement with the anterior delt to the chest. Some will say that it's 30% less. Some will say it's 30% more. Whatever the case is, the truth's probably somewhere in the middle there. Doesn't matter, you get a ton of engagement with the anterior chest or the anterior delt when we're doing chest. So just like upper chest, when we're doing any of our flat bench, it's going to be the exact same challenge, so we have to work around that. So I'm going to share with you a couple things that I like to do to go ahead and really get that squeeze in the chest. And that's the biggest challenge is not too many people do chest and walk away and say, wow, man, I really just got that deep burn in my chest. It's like when you do biceps and you're doing curls, you can just feel that burn, you feel that peak contraction. Well, most people never feel a peak contraction in their chest. A lot of times when you're doing bench press or even when you're doing, you know, cable flies, you end up walking away with your delts feeling very fatigued. So today we're going to talk about how we really get that peak contraction, that isolation in the chest. And the way that I like to do that is starting off with an isolation exercise. So next week we're going to go through a whole chest routine, but I'm going to share some of the little tricks with you guys right now. So right behind over here, cables. Now, if you have the option of adjusting cable height, that's great. I actually prefer when I'm doing chest, I like to bring the cables down a little higher, because what I'm trying to do is squeeze right out in front of me versus squeezing down. But I don't have that option on this cable machine. So one of the things that you want to focus on, I'm going to step towards you here, is range of motion. So last week we talked about the anterior delts. They're very strong from here to about here. So where you're gonna really start to engage the chest even more and take the delts out of it is that range of motion from here to the midline. Now with the traditional fly, we're stopping in the middle, we're cutting ourselves short, not getting that maximum range of motion. So we talked about doing a crossover. So for chest, I like to start with an isolation exercise like a crossover here, but what I wanna focus on is going nipple height. Yes, I said nipple. So instead of going high like we would on upper chest, we're gonna go to nipple height. And what I want you to do is focus on getting a big chest, sticking your chest out. Too many people round over when they're doing flies or even crossovers, and it starts to look like this. I'm getting a ton of delts here. So what I want you to do is chin up, chest out. And you're gonna feel a big stretch when you do this. But I don't want you to focus on this stretch out here as much as I want you to focus on this inner range of motion right here, chest up, and I want you to really think about squeezing in the middle here. Now, people ask, well, how do I develop my inner chest versus my outer chest, lower chest, upper chest? Now, theoretically, the muscle is supposed to fire evenly. So if you're engaging your outer, you're supposed to be engaging your inner chest. That's theoretical, that's according to textbooks. And I've never found that to be the case. All the professional bodybuilders I know, they'll tell you the exact same thing. Muscles don't fire evenly. So in order to really get the inner portion of your chest firing, you gotta get that range of motion. And that's a problem. Everyone talks about the bench press. Bench press is the king of building chest. This isn't true. Bench press is a great compound movement for building overall strength in your upper body. Why? Well, because you're gonna work your chest, you're gonna work your delts, and you're also gonna work your triceps. So it's a great strength building exercise, but it's not a great chest isolation exercise. But here's the challenge. Just doing exercises that are convergent, meaning you're converging to the midline here, these are great for isolating, but you still need to mix in some of your traditional pressing movements to go ahead and maximize chest development. So that's why I like to start with an isolation exercise, really focus on full range of motion, getting that contraction right here, squeezing towards the middle. So not a fly, but doing a crossover. Then I'll move over, and that's when I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do a pressing movement. But just like we talked about, Bones, I'm gonna move you out of the way, dude. Just like we talked about with upper chest, I don't like to use a bar. Problem with the bar is we're not getting that range of motion, just like we talked about last week. With a bar, I'm locked into one range of motion, and you can see that my arms aren't converging across my body. Remember our insertion points. Boy. So, if we're originating here from the sternum, come on. All right, third time's the charm. If we're originating from the sternum, we're attaching here on the humerus. You can see, let me stretch this a little bit. All right, so as we come out wide, we're really stretching it. And if you go back to our original video on length tension relationship, that's what you want to get. You want to get that nice stretch. So that's the other thing about doing presses is I like to take my elbows out wide. And you can see the wider my elbow goes, the more that muscle stretches. You want this. And that's why when I say don't do a press with your elbows tight, that may feel strong because you're engaging more of your triceps and even your delts. When you go ahead and you do an internal rotation of your humerus, which means you're turning your thumbs backward. I don't know if you can see that. So that's internal rotation. My elbows go out. In that position, as I do that, so as I go to do a press, right, that's turning my thumbs towards each other. My elbows go nice and wide, just like I did with Bones here. And that's when you're going to get that nice stretch on the chest. Now, you're not going to be in your strongest position there. Why? Because we're isolating a little bit more. So there's a big difference between being strong and isolating a muscle, and that's why a lot of people never make the progress they want to make in the gym, is because they always want to do an exercise where they feel strongest. And when you feel strongest is when you're engaging more muscles, recruiting more muscles to help with that movement. So you have to ask yourself, do you want to get stronger? Is it all about ego? Is it about going to the gym and just lifting heavy? Or are you willing to set your ego aside and go ahead and isolate and make the exercise harder for yourself for the sake of targeting that muscle and building more muscle? So, if you want to target and you want to isolate here, when we do our presses, we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn our elbow out. So, let me just grab any old weight here. So, I told you guys the same thing on upper chest, the same thing applies on flat bench. Thumbs facing each other, elbows wide, then I take the dumbbells wide. Now I really feel a stretch on my chest, so I'm starting wide and I'm squeezing up towards the middle. Now you can't do that with a bench because we're locked into one plane. It ends up looking like this. So look at my upper arm, look at the range of motion on this versus this. So you get more range of motion, more contraction. So nice and wide, thumbs facing each other, feel that stretch. So that's still a compound movement. I'm still getting the same benefit, but I'm getting more range of motion, I'm getting more stretch, more isolation. Now, a lot of people ask, okay, well, where do I press to? I've heard I press low, I've heard I press high towards my neck. On this one, you're gonna wanna press, I like to press about the midline of my chest. If I press too low, then I'm shortening my range of motion. And that's why, have you ever seen anyone on a bench press? They get on a bench and they go to do it and then they arch their back. They lift their butt up and they arch their back. Well, when I do this, right here, what I'm doing is I'm shortening the range of motion. First of all, I'm lifting my chest up, but I'm also making this more like a decline press. And in a decline press, it's a shorter range of motion. I'm using more triceps, so I'm gonna feel stronger. If I arch my back, I can press more, but I'm not isolating. So don't do that. So what I like to do, and I don't press too high. When you come high, yes, you will get more stretch on your chest, but you also have a greater chance of also damaging tendons. It also can put stress on your shoulders. So I don't go too high. I just think about midline of my chest. That's where I bring it down to, and that's where I press it to, right here. So, trying to think what else are some basic tips for you guys. We talked about hand position, getting that stretch. Oh, I got one other exercise for you guys. You'll like this. So this is how I like to finish. So I like to start with an isolation exercise so I can really feel the muscle. Then I move into my compound movements, but then I like to finish again. Now, you're gonna have to do these lighter than you do traditional crossovers. And this one is not a crossover, it is a fly. But what I want you guys to focus on is instead of focusing on your hands, and actually try this right now at home. Take one hand, put it on your anterior delt, and with your thumb facing towards the middle, I want you to squeeze in. And you can feel your anterior delt really contract. But if we were to go ahead and we were to bring our elbows in and you squeeze in like this, you feel your anterior delt is a lot more relaxed. Okay, and that's what we're trying to do, is take our anterior delt out of it. So instead of a traditional fly like this, what we're gonna do is think about our elbows, not our hands. So don't think about squeezing your hands together, think about squeezing your elbows together. So it's gonna look like this. Right here. Hands stay high the whole time, squeezing the elbows in, chest out like we talked about. Nice big chest, stick it out, squeeze to the middle. And I get that extra count in the middle, and I squeeze them in. You're gonna feel a nice, good contraction. Like when you're doing bench, your chest never feels like that maximum contraction. I always like to think back to like bodybuilding. If I were to do a most muscular pose for chest, and I were to really just make my chest pop, you'll see the guys and they come in just like this, right? And they come right towards the middle. And that's gonna get that full contraction. And so people talk about, how do I get, more of the inner chest to fire? This is how you do it. So it's right here, squeezing the elbows in. Now, if you have a pec deck machine that has the pads, there's an opportunity. Most people don't use the pec deck machine the way that you really could. Most people grab the handles up top, and you see their elbows get loose. Matter of fact, their elbows end up flaring out and they squeeze in using their hands. Don't do that. If you have the pad, take advantage of that. Keep your hands nice and light. Press your elbows into the pads and squeeze towards the middle. You're not gonna feel strong, like I said, but this isn't about feeling strong. It's not about how much weight you use. It's about how much you isolate and really make that targeted muscle work. So you're gonna go lighter than you normally do. Use your elbows, squeeze in. Same thing here on these flies. You're gonna have to go light in the beginning. You're not gonna feel as strong as you do on a traditional fly. But again, set your ego aside for targeting the muscle. So those are some tips on how to build your chest. Last week, again, like I said, we talked about upper chest. But next week, we're gonna bring it all together, and I'm gonna show you guys how I train chest, both upper and lower chest. We'll talk about sets, we'll talk about reps, bring it all together in one workout. So I'll see you guys next week.